Hey everyone, how y'all doing? Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up. So I only read 10 books in the month of October, which is 9 books less than September. I think I pushed myself a little bit too hard in September when I was kind of recuperating in October. I did not get to a lot of the books on my TBR, I feel like, but I did read some really amazing books that I'm super excited to talk about. Normally I do these like in chronological order of when I read them, but I think for this one I'm going to organize it into different categories. So I'm going to talk about adult romances first, and then I'm going to talk about the young adult books that I read, and then I'll get into like the children's books at the end. There's only like 2 of them. I will be putting timestamps in this video, so if you want to skip towards a specific age category, then you can do so, but let's just get started. So first I'm going to talk about the adult romances that I read. So the first one I want to talk about is Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. This is an arc that I received from HCC Frenzy, HarperCollins, and it came out back in August, but I finally got around to it in October. I have a reading vlog where I was reading like spooky Halloween-y books, and this one was included in that. If you want to see my like real-time reactions to it, I will link that up above in the cards for you to check out. But I really enjoyed this book. It's kind of like a paranormal romance, I guess. I've noticed this huge trend in publishing recently where it's like first and foremost a romance book, but it has like an underlying note of like magic and like witches and just really fun stuff. And I think I found that that's like my sweet spot recently for like fantasy type books. I just really enjoy it when like the main part of it is like the romance, and that was no different for this book. I really loved this story. It's basically about our main character who's a witch, but she has no idea that she's a witch because all of her magical memories were taken from her. But then she gets attacked by this magical beast, and then her friends who are also all witches have to like kind of tell her the truth, and memories start trickling back to her. I did not realize when I first picked this book up that it is the first in like a series or a duology. The second book I believe is following our main character's sister. I wish I knew that going into this book, so I was kind of getting to the end and I was like, either this book is going to be incredibly rushed at the end or there's going to be another book. I don't know how I feel about the sequel following her sister. I guess we'll see. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. The beginning was a little bit rough for me just because I felt like the first chapter in particular was quite info dumpy. There's just like a lot of character names being thrown around, and we got like the backstory between our main character and like all these other characters like right away in that first chapter, and it was just a lot. So that was like kind of my only complaint at the beginning there, was just it was a little bit info dumpy. But I really loved this world. I loved the characters. I loved the romance. I loved the plot. But I do have to say that my favorite thing about the book was the romance. That's kind of what kept me reading. So while I did like the plot and everything else, like my main drive for enjoying the book was the romance. But yeah, like I literally stayed up till 4 a.m. reading this book so that I could read it in a sitting because I was just so enthralled by it. Like I just had to know how it was going to end. Like I had no intentions of reading this book in a sitting, and I think I mentioned that in the reading vlog, how I was like, I know I should put this book down, but like I can't do it. Like I just need to keep reading. Like I don't know, it was just such an enjoyable time. It was a quick read. I really loved the romance in it. Like you guys don't even understand, I loved it so much. So yeah, I'm really glad that I received an arc of this one. I'm really glad that I loved it. I'm really anticipating the sequel, and I'm gonna have to get myself a finished copy of this at some point, but I really enjoyed it and I do highly recommend it. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. So I read this as a part of the Besties and Books book club that I co-host with my friend Alyssa. I will leave her channel down below. I also have our Besties and Books Twitter linked down below all the time, so you guys can go check that out there. But this was our very first Besties and Book club pick, and it was such a good one to start off with because we both really enjoyed it. So this book is basically about our main character Florence, and she is a ghostwriter for a super popular romance author, and she goes to have a meeting with her new editor, and she's planning on begging for an extension on her deadline because she's recently gone through a really difficult breakup and she just doesn't really believe in the happily ever afters that she's supposed to be writing about. But her editor refuses, and then her dad ends up passing away, so she has to go home to the funeral parlor that her family owns to kind of help with the funeral arrangements for her dad. And then her new editor shows up at the funeral parlor as a ghost. I love this book so much. I am just gonna put like a trigger warning for like death of a parent, obviously. I don't know why, but like going into this book I didn't think it was going to be sad or heavy. I was just kind of focused on the romance aspect of it, and then reading it I was like, oh right, like obviously her dad died and a huge part of the plot is her dealing with her dad's death and the funeral, so obviously this book was going to be sad. And then also like like everything with her ghost editor and things like that. Like it just didn't clue into my brain for some reason that this book was going to be sad, but it definitely was. Like I totally teared up at multiple points. It was quite emotional. So if that is something that's going to be hard for you to read about, just be cautious going into this book. But I loved this book so much. I love Ashley Poston. I love her like contemporary type books, her Once Upon a Con series. I just love her writing so much. So I was really excited when she was coming out with this adult romance novel, and she knocked it out of the park. It was so good. And also writing is a huge part of this book, obviously because she's a ghostwriter and she's currently dealing with like writer's block of sorts, and there's a lot of talk about publishing, and I really personally love reading books about writers or book lovers or publishing in general, and so I really enjoyed that aspect of this book. I believe there were a lot of like pop culture type references as well. Like there was a lot of talk of specific romance authors, like Christina Lauren I know was mentioned quite a few times. It's like I know that bothers some people, but I personally really enjoyed it. But yeah, I don't know, this book was just so cute and so full of heart and love and family and relationships, and it was just so beautifully told. If you want to know more of my thoughts about this though, like you can check out the live show that me and Alyssa did discussing this book in depth. It does contain spoilers, so obviously only watch that if you've read this book, but if you have not yet read it, I do highly recommend it. It is perfect for like the fall season, but you can obviously read it at any time and it will still be thoroughly enjoyable. So I really loved this one. I'm really glad that I loved this one, and it's definitely a book that I can see myself rereading in the future. Okay, so the next two books I'm going to talk about together because they are part of the same series. So we have The Ex-Hex and The Kiss Curse, both by Erin Sterling. So this one was a reread for me. This book came out last year and I read it on Halloween last year in one sitting. Like I just sat down on Halloween, kind of like in the evening time, and it was all dark out and it was just like the perfect vibe. I absolutely adored reading it like that. So this year I read this one on the 30th and I read this one on Halloween, and it was equally as enjoyable of an experience. Like these books are just so much fun, especially around this time of the year. So obviously this year I wanted to reread this book before getting into this one because this book follows our main character's cousin from this book. Basically, if you don't know what this book is about, we follow our main character Vivi, and we open up the book when she's 19, I believe, and she's just gotten her heart broken by this guy named Reese. They were dating for a few months and then she found out that he was betrothed to somebody else and he'd been keeping it a secret from her, and so she broke up with him and she's heartbroken, and she's a witch. Probably should have mentioned that to begin with. She's a witch, and with her cousin Gwen, who is the main character in this book, they put what they believe to be a fake curse on Reese. And then I think like 9 or 10 years later, Reese has to come back to town because his family is like kind of like the founding family of the town, or like the town is charged by his family's magic and he has to kind of recharge the ley lines. And so when he comes back to town, they realize that the fake curse that they put on him wasn't actually fake at all. And so Vivi kind of has to help Reese out because his magic's all wonky. It's a really fun book, second chance romance, all this fun vibes. I absolutely adore it. This book, however, follows our main character Gwen, and she runs this like fun little like witchy shop that sells like fake witchy items to the non-magic folk of the town. It's like a novelty shop kind of, I guess. And then one day one of Reese's brothers moves back to the town and he opens up like a very similar shop across the way, and they're kind of like rivalry shops with each other. It's also super fun. I will say that I love this one the most out of the two. There is going to be a third book, so I guess we'll see how my feelings change when that book comes out, I think next year, and I believe that follows Reese's other brother. But for right now, this one is definitely my favorite of the two. I love the romance, I love the plot, I just love everything about this book. And then with this one, and I think I've heard quite a few other people say this as well, where they really liked the romance in this book, but the plot kind of left something to be desired. Like it just wasn't as strong as the plot in this book. It just wasn't as fun, I guess you could say. And so like this one just kind of has the whole package, while this one was just kind of missing a little something, but it was still really enjoyable. And I do really love this romance. Like it was so freaking cute, and it 100% made up for the lack of plot. Not like the plot was lacking necessarily, like it was still really enjoyable and really fun. I loved the rivalry stores and all the vibes between the two main characters, but there was just something so special about this first book that I don't know if anything can compare. But these were both so enjoyable. I definitely recommend them. They're super cute, quick reads, and they've definitely become like some of my favorite romance books ever. So I really enjoyed reading these ones. Perfect for October, and I think they will become like yearly rereads for me. Okay, so those were all of the adult romances that that I read. So now to get into the YA books that I read in October. So I'm just going to quickly go through the ones that I don't have with me physically. So the first book that I read was The Book of Fates by Rachel Moore. Rachel Moore is one of my very, very good friends, and I'm so unbelievably lucky and honored to have read her book early. It does come out fall of next year, so she sent it to me to read. This was actually my second time reading it, but this is like the most updated version of it, and let me tell you, this book is so good. I already knew that obviously, but with the revisions she's done since getting a book deal, it's just so good. There are so many new scenes in there that I've never read before, and they're just so amazing. You guys are absolutely going to fall in love with this cast of characters and the story and her writing. She is so funny, it's like ridiculous. Just like her writing is so clever and humorous and everything you want in a story. It is amazing. I don't know how much is released about the plot of this book, so I'm not gonna like say too much about it. I just kind of wanted to mention that I read it, but I'll make sure to leave the Goodreads link for it down below so you guys can go check it out, add it to your Goodreads, because trust me when I say that you guys are not gonna want to miss out on this book. Like, it is going to be so good. And actually, while we're on the topic of Rachel really quickly, she's going to be one of my guests on my NaNoWriMo live shows that I'm currently doing. So we're going to be going live for writing sprints on the 22nd of November. I'll see if I can link the live show up above in the corner so you guys can like set a reminder for it or something, because we're going to be doing writing sprints, and we're also going to be chatting about writing and her book, which is just going to be so much fun. So definitely, if you have any interest in her book at all, or you want to do some live write-ins with us, then definitely make sure to set a reminder for that live show. But now we can move on to the other book, which was an audiobook that I listened to, and it was The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. So this was the only audiobook that I listened to this month. I listened to it while doing my bullet journal spreads primarily, and I honestly don't have much to say about this book. I didn't necessarily love it, but I also didn't dislike it by any means. I just feel like I wasn't fully paying attention to it, and I also just feel like it wasn't fully a book for me. I don't know, it's just kind of something that I saw on the Overdrive app, and I didn't really look into it too much. I was just like, ghosts, sure, and I checked it out without like really knowing what it was about. So I think it was just like a not for me kind of situation, but the cover is beautiful. I do think the writing was good, and the narration of the audiobook was good as well. I just honestly don't have that many thoughts about it to talk about, so we can just move right along into the other books that I read. So the first one was another reread for me, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. So I've literally read it for like the last 4 years or so, and that is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. So this is kind of just like the perfect little graphic novel to read. Why do I always open up to a page that has like barely any illustrations on it? My goodness. But it's just like the perfect like fall graphic novel to read. We basically follow our main characters, Deja and Josie, and the story takes place on Halloween. It's their last night working at this pumpkin patch that they've worked out for years, and Deja kind of takes it upon herself to get Josie to finally talk to the girl that he's been crushing on ever since they started working at the pumpkin patch. So they kind of go on this full like journey throughout the pumpkin patch trying to find her, because it's a very chaotic night. Everybody keeps changing what station they're working at. So every time they try to find her, they end up realizing she's somewhere else. It's full of Halloween hijinks. It's really fun. The vibes are so good. The artwork is literally stunning, and I just think you can't really go wrong with a good, fun Halloween graphic novel. The next book I read, I'm actually kind of sad to talk about, and it's Now Entering Adamsville by Francesca Zappia. This is a book that's been on my TBR for I'd say like 2 years. I think I bought it at the same time I bought Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas when that book came out, and I believe that was in 2020. Time means nothing. And I was really excited for this book for a couple of different reasons. One, it's Francesca Zappia. She wrote one of my favorite books, Eliza and Her Monsters. I also really enjoyed her book Made You Up, but my ultimate favorite is Eliza and Her Monsters, and so I was kind of excited to read something a little bit different from her. My understanding of this book was it was about ghosts, and that's not really what I got from this book. So I didn't really enjoy this book all that much, and I feel like it's purely because of my own expectations going into it. Nothing against the book itself, but I was really wanting like a ghost-centric story, and again, that's on me for having those expectations. That's on me for maybe not fully understanding the synopsis or not fully reading it and just kind of going in a little bit blindly. Also, I feel like I just didn't fully connect to any of the characters or anything. I don't know. I really don't have anything to say about this book beyond the fact that I'm just disappointed that I didn't love it as much as I wanted to, or that it wasn't about ghosts as much as I wanted it to be about ghosts. Yeah, I was gonna include this in the same reading vlog that I did Small Town Big Magic in, but then I ended up not liking it, and so I was like, no, like I don't want to take down the mood of that video by including a book that I didn't really enjoy into it. So I am sad that I did not enjoy this book, but it is what it is. Moving right along. Okay, so the final 2 books that I read were just a couple of like children's-esque books, so I can talk about them really quickly with you guys. So the first book is the Spiderwick Chronicles, the Field Guide. This is the first book in the Spiderwick Chronicles. So I decided to read this book one day just really quickly because I haven't read it since I was a kid. And I honestly felt like I didn't remember too much about it. I also had not watched the movie since I was a kid. So I felt like I just wanted like a bit of a refresher on the story to kind of see if I wanted to read the whole series, or I don't know. It just felt like a good time to pick it up. Now, this book is super short, okay? Super short, first book in a series. I understand that. Nothing happened in this book, okay? I feel like the entirety of this book felt like the first act in a novel, and I do understand it's a children's book. I do understand that. And if I had the other books like readily available, maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but like I do feel like the entirety of this first book was like the first act in a novel, and like I feel like the ending of it should have been like more like halfway through the book at least, but it wasn't. So I felt like we were like leading up to something so big, and then I was just kind of like let down because I didn't have the next book to read. I do own it somewhere, I just don't know where it is. However, I did enjoy it. It was a fun little time. Literally read it in the span of like a half hour. I read it in the car on the way to get my COVID and flu shot, so that was fun. I do like the illustrations in it. This kind of like just like pen, like scratchy kind of art style. I know nothing about art, so don't take that literally, but like it's just a really fun little art style, and it really like fits the vibe of this whole series. I am intrigued to rewatch the movie. There's also a new series, I believe, coming out. But yeah, I don't know when I'll ever continue this or when I'll watch the movie or anything, but I did enjoy it. It was a fun time. I just kind of wanted a little bit more from this first book, you know, but again, like I said, it's a children's book. Obviously it's really short. I just kind of wanted a little bit more from the story. Anyways, still enjoyable to read at this time of the year. And then just kind of for funsies, I picked up Casper the Friendly Ghost and Friends Volume 1. So this is a little comic volume that I've had since I was a kid, and so I thought it'd be super fun to just kind of reread it. I haven't read it since I was young, so I thought, why not give it a whirl? So obviously it's just Casper comics, you know, fun times. I enjoyed this well enough. I like the Casper comics and the Spooky comics, who I believe is like Casper's cousin or something. I really hated the Baby Huey ones though. These ones were not my favorite. And then there was one about a little witch, Wendy the Good Little Witch. Hers were enjoyable as well, but my favorites were obviously Casper. That's kind of what I was reading this collection for. But it was just a fun, spooky little time, you know? Who doesn't like Casper? I know I do. So those were all of the books that I read in the month of October. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Comment down below and let me know what you guys read in the month of October, or if you've read any of the books that I read, and let me know what you thought about them. Subscribe if you have not yet already, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!